Welcome to Let's Talk Migraine, where we talk about some of the hottest topics faced by people who live with this disabling and complex neurological disorder that affects nearly 40 million people in the US and 1 billion globally. My name is Shoshana Lipson, and I want to give a special welcome to our patient advocate panel, Erin Atkinson, Marina Medved-Lentini from Parenting with Migraine, and Erica Carrasco from Achy Smile. All four of us live with migraine. All four of us are parents. But we want to remind you that nothing we say here should be taken as medical advice. We're speaking purely from our own experience and encourage you to partner with your doctor in any medical decisions. So today we're going to be talking about parenting with migraine. This is a really emotional topic, and it is something that is near to each of our panelists' hearts. So let's just jump right in with it. And we're going to start out with each of the panelists just describing some of the words that come to their mind when they think about their experience parenting with migraine. We're going to start with you, Erica.
So I would say my keywords would be like complicated, guilt, empathy, and love, because it takes a lot of love.
Guilt is definitely one of those words for me. Debilitation, being trapped, helplessness.
I would say overwhelm and exhaustion and couch and anger. I feel like anger wasn't mentioned, or maybe it was, but I feel a lot of that. Probably more than guilt for me. And laundry, because, there's a lot of laundry, migraine or not.
Yeah, I like those words like helplessness, being trapped. I mean, for me, I guess, obviously joy. I absolutely would never, ever regret having my children. I have 3 sons, but scared, guilty, stressed, afraid, and just kind of not knowing what the future holds. There's a lot of emotions that go along with being a parent. So as each of us talk for the first time, we're going to share, which children we have, how old they are, just so you can know a little bit more about us. The challenges of parenting with migraine vary a lot by age, whether you have a young baby or even if you have children that are out of the house and you're an empty nester, you're still a parent and there's still challenges. So we're going to talk about a little bit of some of those challenges. For myself, I have 3 sons. They are all in their 20s. They are all outside the home. I had 3 of them in 3.5 years. And after my 3rd child, shortly after, my migraine became chronic, and it was very, very challenging. So that's just a little bit about my experience. Marina, why don't you share a little bit about the ages of your children, and then what type of activities you can enjoy or share with your children during a migraine attack?
So unless it's a really bad attack, I try to spend as much time with the kids as I can. But my son loves to play video games. So I throw on my migraine glasses and, we play that Mario World or whatever it is that they play these days. And they both love to do puzzles and reading. And we've been doing this. We have this giant book of finding hidden objects. So we do that for an hour every night. If I can't read, if I don't feel well enough to read. Obviously, I prefer to just sit on the couch, cuddle, and watch a movie and eat popcorn. That would be my favorite. And that's something we've always done. But, anything that doesn't involve too much moving for me, I enjoy. But of course, I feel like, now that my kids are 9 and 7, I've probably done it all through migraine attacks at this point, because I try to push through and be there for them. But I would say those are the activities I enjoy. Not a lot of moving for me.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Erica or Erin? What do you do with your kids when you have or when you had a migraine attack when they were younger?
Well, for me, my youngest son, who is almost 9 years old, we play Beyblades. It's a very low impact activity, I guess, from my standpoint. I can just sit there and do the little ripcord things and play with them. We do family movie night. We'll put on a movie, and I'll bring my sunglasses so that if it's too bright or like an action film or something, that it helps to filter out some of those bright lights. I've got my favorite recliner that reclines back just enough where I can feel relaxed. And sometimes I can manage to go for a walk with the kids if we're doing some outdoor activities or something, but it really depends on the level of the migraine. But nothing too intense.
Yeah, I remember when my kids were little. Marissa's 23 and Noah is 21, so my kids are old now. But I remember when Marissa was little, she would have like her dolls or her Barbies, and I'd be in bed because when I have a hemiplegic migraine attack and it's severe, I'm completely disabled. So I would have her like on my bed, or she would come to my room, be on the bed with me because she just wanted to be near me, and we'd just play her with her dolls. Really, she'd play, and I would just like hold one up and really not do much, but it was enough for her. So, whatever makes them happy, in my opinion, as long as if you can be next to them, that's usually all they need. Like my son just wanted to be next to me. He didn't actually interact with me or play with me. He was just there, and I think that
Right.
comforted him knowing that I was close by, but he also knew that I just couldn't participate. And so that's how it usually was when they were little.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I have so few memories of activities I did with my kids when they were really young. I think I just kind of blacked out that phase of my life, which is really sad. But I did a lot of crafts and things like that inside. Um, then I became a single parent when they were preteens, and those I have very, very clear memories about. And I remember the first time I had a migraine attack when I was single, and I was thinking, what on earth am I going to do? I have no one to fall back on. I have no one to watch my kids. And, by that time they were preteens, they were a little bit more self-dependent, independent, but also a little bit more dangerous as well at that age, because they can get up to a lot of stuff. And so it was very scary for me. We did a lot of indoor activities. If I was well enough, I would just be lying on the couch and they would watch TV or they would play video games. We would do board games. If it was a little bit worse, I would literally be sleeping on the couch. Like you said, Erica, they just wanted to kind of be around me. The scary times were when I was completely out of it because my migraine attacks would be so severe at times. And that was really scary because I literally was not able to cook for them. They actually had to learn to cook for themselves. They had to learn to do their own laundry. And so there was a lot of guilt in that. Now that they're older, when they come to visit, or I go to visit them, they understand that everything's kind of up in the air. So, like, I just visited my son in Philadelphia, and he knew it all depended on whether I was having a migraine attack or not. But our focus is always on things that I can do. So if it's hot, if it's sunny and I don't feel well, we won't go outside. At home, we play a lot of board games. We love board games. And I think that really builds a lot of happy memories just doing things like that. And we laugh a lot together. So focusing on things that I can do or that I could do with my kids was really helpful versus getting guilty about the things that I couldn't do because there were so many things that I couldn't do. It was really challenging. So, Erin, let's kind of switch questions. How did you explain to your children that you have migraine, or have you explained to them that you have migraine, and what that means to them and the impact it has on your family?
Uh, it's a bit of a loaded question. So my oldest son is almost 21. I've got five of my own. They started probably around when he was 10. Um, my kids are 8, 12, 14, 16, and almost 21. So my 8 and 21 or 8 and 20-year-old will be 9 and 21 in November. So been dealing with it for quite a long time. It kind of, I guess my older kids kind of explained it to my younger ones. They could see that I was kind of out of sorts. I went from working a very laborious job, 60 hours a week, where I had to climb telephone poles, to, hey, I can't really do much of anything now. And so, my older kids saw me very active and very much, involved in doing all kinds of things to not being able to take care of myself. And so it was more of them kind of figuring it out as we went along. And, I was still navigating my triggers. I've always had migraines since childhood, but they became chronic and more involved and I had more triggers. So it was kind of a learning process along the years. And so a lot of times what that would mean is my daughters wouldn't be able to wear perfume. I wouldn't be able to wear my favorite colognes, the certain smells from foods would trigger a migraine attack. So it would just, different activities. It also meant that I might not be able to drive you to school if you missed the bus.
Right.
My 21-year-old son, I remember having to drive him to school for a band practice one time, and I went blind halfway through the drive. Thankfully I knew the back roads, and it was like it was like a flashlight was in my eyes. I could barely see. I parked in the parking lot and waited for him because I knew I wasn't going to be able to make the trip twice.
Right.
So it's kind of just learning. I guess they kind of walked on eggshells around me for a little while until I could figure out where, what my triggers were and what my treatment, self-treatment would be, so that I could not interrupt their lives as, any more than it already was. So it's kind of a loaded answer, but that's.
No, that's good. It's all good. Yeah. What about you, Marina? Your children are younger. Have you explained to your children, or how do you talk to them about the fact that you have migraine?
Yeah, so my kids have never really known me without migraine. They've just always known that I am limited in what I can do because I've had pain. I became chronic when I was pregnant and gave birth. So I've always needed them to be quiet. I've always needed, time to recover. Always told them to be quiet. Always had to tell them no when I couldn't do certain things. So
Yeah.
it's just part of their life. And, when I explain things to them about migraine, it's always been, age appropriate as they've been growing up. And now that my son also has migraine, he also understands what it means. I always, I explain to them, I use the traffic light. I think we talked about it last time, maybe the traffic light system, red, yellow, green, what my attacks feel like, so they always ask, what color are you? Does that mean we can do things? So migraine doesn't just, affect me or you, it affects the whole family to the core.
Right. Absolutely. What about you, Erica? What did you tell your kids, and how young?
So, just like Marina, my kids pretty much have always known me with migraine. So, I remember them being little, and I'm pretty sure this is part of another question, but I remember them like bringing me things for my head, like something cold. They'd bring me water, some food. Like they would try to be so helpful. They were like these little helpers, and they hated seeing mom hurting so bad, And I just don't remember a time when I had to really explain it so much. I've always been an open book with them, so they knew when I had doctor's appointments. They went with me to doctor's appointments. I didn't really like shelter them from it or anything like that, or try to hide my attacks. There was no way I could hide it. I know for some people it's easy to hide their attack because it is an invisible a disease for some people, but for me it was not invisible. So
Right.
it's very apparent. So they've always known that there was something wrong with mom. They may not have realized how big of an issue it is, but I think I'm going to leave that story for another question because I know we're going to talk about that.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to get to that next. So you kind of touched on it, but everything that all of you said, I totally relate to. I was thinking about, how it impacted my kids. And I should say that I was a single parent for several years, and I remarried. And then I had two stepdaughters as well. So I actually had a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14, 15, and 16-year-old, all in my house at the same time, when my migraine attacks were absolutely at their worst. And my biggest trigger is scents. So you can just imagine, 5 teenagers all being told you cannot wear anything scented. I mean, anything, absolutely not Axe. Like Axe is like evil for me. And it is like my sons used to hide it in their bags when they came home from school. And I would go hunt, and I was ruthless. I got to tell you, even with my stepdaughters, I was ruthless. I would find stuff in their room and it would just go in the trash. I'm like, you don't understand. This is not negotiable. But it's really hard because then if they're with friends, or they borrow friends, like especially girls, they borrow friends' clothes and then they come home stinking of perfume. And it's really hard. And we just got to the point we said, look, you're wearing something that smells. You got to go straight in the shower. You got to wash your hair, and those clothes have got to go in a bag. And it's really hard. I got to tell you, when you marry and you're also taking care of someone else's children, it's even harder to communicate that to them than it is of your own kids. If your own kids, you could say it's just the way it is, but it was definitely challenging. I would say the fragrance thing, but it was so important that that I just started saying it again and again and again. And I still say it, and when they bring their girlfriends or one of my sons are married or the boyfriend's home, I'll tell them, by the way, remind your boyfriend or your girlfriend that they cannot wear anything scented in my house or around me. And I still feel guilty about asking that. And I have to keep reminding myself, I can't help it. When I first talked about my children about migraine, I would say the same as the rest of you. My kids have never known me without migraine, ever know me without migraine. And that's really challenging. And I was asking my sons, I was joking before this, my sons are not going to text me back because they're boys. But one of them was like texting me back and just saying that he knew when he was really young, by the time he was like 6 or 7, he knew that I had migraine, that there was something different. And it made him really worried and anxious. But the really nice thing that he said to me, and we're going to get to this a little bit later, I know we're kind of jumping around, is that he never felt angry at me for the things that I couldn't do. Never, ever felt angry, neglected, or disappointed, especially when stuff just fell through. And that's really good for a parent to hear that your kid, was able to respond like that. And I think that's the goal for any parent is to have that. But definitely keep your kids in the loop. I still remember the times I was carted off to the emergency room and, leaving my kids behind and just seeing their faces, or the time I was an inpatient for 3 weeks at a hospital for migraine, and it's really hard to see their faces because they don't understand and it can be scary for them. And so it's so important to communicate with them what is going on. We actually had a live question that we're going to get to before we go back to the question that you were answering, Erica. And that is, how should you respond when your child asks, what can I do to make the pain go away? And that's kind of part of the next question. So why don't we come back to you, Erica, with that? Did you involve your children in helping you manage your migraine attacks? And how did you respond did your children ever ask, how can I make the pain go away?
They didn't ask that specifically. I think because they've always known me to have these migraine attacks. When they were little, I didn't have them as often as I did like a couple of years ago, but they would, like I said, they'd bring me towels for my head and they would like touch my face. Like they would do things to see if I would try to feel better. They didn't ask, they just acted.
Yeah.
They would bring me water, they bring my medications because they knew where those were. Like we were just like this little team. If Steven was home, he would be like, Marissa, go get this, or Noah, go get this, and everybody would kind of attack all at once, right? Like try to make me
Yep.
more comfortable. They knew they couldn't make me feel better because they knew the attacks last forever. So they just did what they could to make me feel better. And then once they kind of all did their thing, they would then kind of just leave me alone. They knew that's also what I needed. Um, and so I really appreciated that they were able to not fight me on that or rush in screaming and things like that. Like they knew from a very early age that when I was laying in bed, not feeling well, I really am not to be disturbed. And usually,
Yep.
Stephen was home, so he was able to be with them during that time. But it's just so difficult to know whether I answered that question or not.
No, you did. You did great. And one of the things you said really kind of jumped out at me. And if people were listening carefully, there may be some of you out there that are shocked by this. You said that one of your kids would bring you your medication. And of course, I'm sitting here thinking I must be the worst mother in the world because, especially once I was a single parent, I had all my medications in a bag in a drawer, and my middle son was the one who was assigned. He knew where the medications were, and he'd bring me my bag because I literally could not get out of bed. I would just about be able to inject myself, but I had to have everything brought to me. And so, I'm sitting here thinking, oh my goodness, no other parent does that. But we do, and it's obviously got to be in a safe way, and it's got to be, your children have got to be old enough for it. Like I remember, again, when I was a single parent, you're thinking, what can you do when you're single and you have kids and you have a migraine attack? One of my sons saying, hey, I'm just going to drive you to the hospital. I'm like, no, let's not do that because you haven't even started driving lessons yet, let alone have a driver's license. So don't worry, I didn't ever do that with my kids. But the kids, they do want to know how they can make you better. They can feel kind of helpless. And it's heartbreaking when they do that. So I don't know. What about you, Marina? Did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, my daughter likes when I sit down and fill my pill container with pills for the week. So she likes to help me do that. And she thinks it's like an adult job, so she feels, helpful. They do like to bring me certain things, or sometimes they feel like, they'd rather play their games. But they always like very cuddly, and they come and, they'll
Yeah.
be playing and they'll see me on the couch. They'll come over and like kiss my head or kiss my nose, or they'll snuggle up next to me. And that's like what I need. I always tell my husband we need like a dog or therapy dog, so I can,
Yeah.
when I'm laying down, I love like some like pressure against my legs, when I'm in pain. And he says, well, who's going to walk the dog? It will all fall on me. So
Right.
no dog for me, but at least the kids like lay down next to me when they're reading to me or something like that. So I love that when they're near me when I don't feel good. And, um, yeah. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
great. I love that. I love that. And again, it's like it can be shocking for some people that your kids get involved in this kind of thing, but as long as it's done in a safe way, it's also helpful for them, to feel like they're doing something. It's really important because they can't make the pain go away, but
And
they can
another
do things that get them involved, right?
Yeah, and another thing, actually, they love doing advocacy work with me. They love getting involved in
Yeah.
like social media in my account. They always like, oh, can we do a video together? And
Yeah.
like they love getting involved with the Migraine at School initiative, that helps kids with migraine. My son is always like, Ella, you cannot be in the video because you do not have migraine. This video is for
Right.
me, and how like sharing about the Migraine at School, like with like
Yeah.
our library and the community. And for me, advocacy is part of the migraine treatment. Like I always say that.
Yeah.
So having them involved in that is kind of special too.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Definitely. I totally relate to that. Let's jump over to you, Erin. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, or we're actually going to skip one of the questions because we kind of covered it. So we're going to go to how do you cope with feelings of guilt that you have or may have passed migraine onto your children? And this is not about children with migraine. That's not what this particular event's about, but dealing with the guilt that, if you have passed on to your children or you think you may have, or you're worried that you may in the future, how do you deal with the guilt of that?
It's it's hard because we as parents we want to protect our children, and
Right.
especially for me as a dad, I want to do everything physically possible to, I'm kind of, supposed to be the provider and the strong arm, trying to make sure that I'm not hurting my children. And I know that my 16-year-old and my 14-year-old daughters, they are 16-year-old son and 14-year-old daughter, they both have experienced migraine attacks. My 16-year-old, he seems to have it a little bit more than my daughter does, and I feel an immense amount of guilt for that because he's got a lot of other issues that he's had to deal with. He's got a birth trauma injury. He's got some other issues, mental health issues he's working through, and to add migraine into that, I can only take on so much, and protect him so much,
Yeah.
and so I have to realize that. I have to understand, and I have to accept that there's only so much that I can do, and just to try to work through the guilt in the same way that we all try to work through migraine attacks. Is you have to understand that there's only so much that we can do before we have to just
Right.
let it go and let it be what it is, and do what we can do and do it as best as
Yeah.
we can do. Be supportive and be loving and being the person that you wish that you had taking care of
Right.
you when you had a migraine attack, and doing that for them, and just feeling out what works best for them,
Yeah.
and really just being open and honest, and being caring for them in the best
Yeah.
way that you can. So it's and taking in consideration that we aren't responsible for whatever genetic code passes on to our children.
Yeah. That's
So
so important. That's so important. I love what you said that, can only do what we can do. And in case anybody here doesn't know the statistics, it's if you have one parent with migraine, there's a 50% chance of any child having migraine. If you have two parents with migraine, there's a 75% chance. All three of my kids have migraine, and it's all been different for them at different ages. Like my one, it was worse during adolescence is now doing the best. Someone who was best during adolescence is now getting worse and worse. That, but yeah, you're right. You have to let that guilt go and just inform them, tell them you'll be there for them, and don't let that guilt, eat you up, because it doesn't mean that you're not a good parent, and it doesn't stop you being a good parent. Let's kind of jump over to you, Erica. I know we got a lot more questions, and we're already halfway through our time, and probably more than halfway through our time. So do you find that you push through the pain more when it comes to your kids? Kind of a strange question, or not. And then Marina, I'm going to ask you that same question as well.
Oh, definitely. I've pushed through plays, band and choir concerts, and that was rough. Like band and choir concerts, that's earplugs,
Yes.
the best invention ever. And then I've pushed through like my own kids' doctor's appointments, just taking them to the park if I'm able to handle the light in any way. Like there's so many things that you push through as a parent, and sometimes you just can't. And so kind of going back to that guilt question, like I feel guilty about feeling guilty because I know it's not my fault.
Yes.
But so, people like me who feel guilty about feeling guilty, like that's just how we are.
Yes.
We're gonna
I
feel
totally
guilty.
get that.
Yeah. So, I mean, pushing through, I feel is just kind of part of living with chronic migraine or living with migraine. I mean, even if you have acute migraine, you still tend to push through at work, going to the grocery store. Like I still do that today. I push through
Yeah.
going to the grocery store. Maybe I make it worse. My kids are with me. When they were little, they would do all the shopping. I just push the cart,
Yeah.
so that's kind of how, I mean, that's just natural, I think, it would be to push
Yeah.
through.
I totally agree. What about you, Marina? Do you tend to
Sometimes,
push through more for your kids?
yeah, sometimes there's no alternative, right, Erica?
Right.
Like, what's
Right.
the alternative? Are you not going to feed your kids? Are you not going to get them ready for school to get on the bus or drive them, whatever you do? Or I mean, the activities, I suppose, are optional, but are they really? You know, once you have
Yeah.
kids, everything, there's really no option. And let me tell you, my amazing parents, sometimes take my kids for days or even a week. They take them during school vacations or long weekends to their house, and they love it. The kids, not my parents. I'm just kidding. My parents love it. My parents are obsessed. And so I am left home. My husband and I are home for like days or a week alone, right? And during that time, I cannot get off the couch. Like I have a migraine attack and it's like, that's it. I can't do anything. Cannot wash
Yeah.
dishes, cannot clean. It's like I'm unable, I am not motivated because the kids are also my motivation.
Yeah.
Like they do give me motivation to get up in the morning, get them, take care of them. And so in a way, yes, they I do push through the pain and my symptoms because of them. And when they're not around, I almost don't have a reason to push through because I work from home. I can work on the
Right.
couch. I
Right.
actually don't need to push through.
Yeah.
I can just,
Absolutely.
not.
Yeah. I totally get that. It makes total sense. Let's talk about those times when you can't push through. So, Marina, again, let's just follow up with you, because your children's still so young. How do you manage the disappointment when you're unable to participate in the activities, when you just cannot push through? And if any of you've seen some of Marina's videos of her kids, they're really amazing. But we all know what migraine's like. There's got to be times that you cannot be doing that with your children, right? So how do you cope with that disappointment?
So, like when they were younger, and they didn't understand much, when we couldn't do an activity because they didn't feel well, I would just say that, we can't do this. And it didn't really bother them that much. And now they definitely feel more disappointed. But, the way I deal with it is disappointment is part of life. We don't just say no because of migraine. We say no for a multitude of reasons, and that's how I look at it. We say no because something is not safe. We say no because they're not old enough for an activity. We say no because an activity is not healthy for them. There's so many reasons to say no to something. We say no because they need to do homework instead of doing something else. Migraine is just a small and debilitating and an awful and disgusting and awful part of it, but
Yeah.
it is just a part, and that's how I look at it. And so I just treat it like one part of our life, and I try not a part that's not my fault. And
Right.
so that's how I explain it to them,
Yeah.
that, okay, we cannot do this because of migraine. Not because of mom, it's because of migraine. We keep it
Yeah.
separate, and yes, they will be disappointed, but they're disappointed for other reasons too. And
Yes.
so I don't take it personally. I can't,
Yeah.
because then
Yeah.
you get eaten alive by guilt. And Erica, that's not healthy to get
I
eaten
love
alive.
that. And you know what? Disappointment is a part of life.
It
and,
is.
and it's okay for our kids to learn how to manage that disappointment. And I think the most important thing is you tell your kids what you can, you help them understand, you tell them you love them, you do what you do. And then there are times they will be disappointed and they're going to have to deal with that disappointment. But that's also part of maturity and growing up. And honestly, I think that if we handle it well as parents and don't make such a big deal about it, then it's going to make our children better young adults and adults in the future. But it is hard, and I'm not a great example. I pushed through way too much when my kids were
For
young,
sure. But
and
then
it made me
also,
sick.
sorry. Yeah, but
No.
also focus on the things that you
Yes.
also do. When they feel
Yep.
disappointed, also remind them, hey, because if it was up to my daughter, we went on vacation on a little weekend trip to like Santa's Village to New Hampshire a month ago, and when we came back, the first thing she says is, hey, can we go to Great Wolf Lodge? Literally just came back from a vacation. If you leave it up to your kids, they'll
Yes.
always want something and they'll always be disappointed because they're
Absolutely.
kids. So remind yourself of all the wonderful things you are doing for your kids, because I
Yes.
know you all are, whatever they are, whatever it is
Yeah.
you're able to do, you are doing
Yeah.
them, and keep reminding yourself of that.
Definitely. I would say, like, also take lots of photographs. Like, I look back and I think about all the times I'm guilty about stuff I couldn't do with my kids. But then I look at the photographs and I think, wow, look at what I did of my kids. I mean, I had 3 boys. We played baseball. I took them kayaking. We went hiking. We did bowling. I took them on vacation. I mean, there was so much that we did do, even though I was sick. And it's important to see that. And we did things at home. We laughed a lot at home. And so it's important to treasure those memories. Let's kind of jump over to you, Aaron. And let's just say, how do you manage your kids' disappointment? And then we'll jump on to the next question, because we're kind of running short of time now. Do you find it hard to ask for help? Because it's sometimes, as parents, it can make us feel like we're not good parents if we need to ask for help, whether it's asking our children for help, like me asking my kids to do their own laundry, which to this day I still feel guilty about. But hey, they know how to do laundry,
No
right?
way.
They know how to do it.
Taught him a skill, and their
Yes.
daughter-in-law will be thankful for you. Sorry, Erin.
Absolutely. No, I tell myself that their wives are going to be grateful for me that they know how to clean the house and do their own laundry. So it's all good. But what about you, Aaron? How do you manage all that?
Well, I being a single parent myself, it's very difficult to juggle all those things. Thankfully, my mom is retired and she lives maybe 20 minutes up the road. So if there's something that I can't do, Grandma can step in, take the kids to do A, B, or C. But there are times when she can't, and sometimes we have to reschedule things. Sometimes schedules don't line up, and so they experience disappointment for different reasons. Maybe maybe their mom has something planned for them on a day that we were going to do something, and there just wasn't proper communication there. So there's a disappointment. From that, there's disappointment when they can't go to their friend's house and play because maybe they've got chores to do or homework, or so it's. I don't feel as bad about the disappointment stuff, because it does kind of blanket their entire lives. We have to deal with disappointment and learn from that. So it's I do feel a little guilt about it when it's because of me, but at the same time, you have to learn that. It's a life skill that you have to learn for
Yeah,
for many things.
absolutely.
And
So true.
that kind of piggybacks on the or kind of segues into the feeling guilty about being a bad parent when asking for help. And I'm used to doing everything by myself, for myself. I'm an only child, so I didn't have anybody to help me out. No siblings or anything like that when I was growing up. So I'm just kind of I'm used to that. But I do have a little bit more grace for myself now to understand that if I can't do it, then my kids aren't going to be able to do whatever it is they need to do. So I have to, swallow my pride and be okay with that, with reaching out. And
Yeah.
I've reached out to friends for things that I used to be able to do, physical things that I used to be able to do at home. I used to be able to do A, B, or C, and now I need to ask for help to do it because I physically can't do things, or it might trigger a
Yeah.
migraine. I used to climb ladders and telephone poles, and now I get vertigo if I go up a step ladder. I have to hold on for dear life, even though it's only a few feet to the ground. So I've got
Yeah.
a friend that helps me come over and hang things if I need to, and or get up on the roof and do whatever I might need up there. So I have to swallow my pride if I want to continue on in life and experience the things and get the things that I need done. I have to be able to be okay with reaching out for help.
I love that. That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So our next to last question, I'm going to go to you, Erica, for this. Someone actually wrote in ahead of time and said, sometimes it feels like my family blames me for my migraine attacks. So looking at this specifically from a parenting perspective, or that I use my pain as an excuse to get out of family activities. How can I respond to these comments? I mean, you had a pretty understanding family, but, what advice would you give for someone who is fielding that in their family as a parent?
So they're very understanding now. But when I first started having symptoms, my kids were really small, but my husband, he wasn't understanding. And he would get really frustrated, really angry. And it wasn't good. Like, we almost lost our marriage to that,
Yeah.
to migraine. And I mean, I can see where someone could think that it would seem pretty convenient if I had an attack when there was something I was supposed to do or somewhere important to go, but I didn't really want to. And then I have an attack in that moment. Like, it seems convenient, right? Like, I think
Right.
anybody would probably think, oh, she's probably faking. But I get really offended when somebody blames me of using a migraine attack to get out of doing something, because I remember how I felt in those early days when I did go through that, when people were like telling me, "Oh, you're over exaggerating. There's no way you're feeling those symptoms." And so I get really upset, or I'll get really offended today, because I can't expect anybody who doesn't live with migraine to understand what it feels like. But I do expect you to have empathy for someone who is going through something, and don't immediately believe that they're lying to you or faking, because that's, to me, that's like a sin.
Yeah.
you know, because I live with it, and it's so hard and it's so draining, and all of the bad words you could think of, I can attribute to migraine, but I can think of really great words too. Maybe not about migraine itself, but what migraine has also given me. Like, I would never have met you guys or the people that I talk to on social media. My kids maybe not would not have learned empathy the way that they have. They are such great people because they know how to take care of someone because of what they've lived through.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't blame me for having migraine, and they don't make me feel guilty today. But like I said, in the early days when I was first diagnosed and going through all of that, I was a highly motivated and outgoing, and I was a hustler. I mean, I still am today, all of those things. But back then I was, I didn't have migraine to stop me. And
Right.
so I know I can see it in people's faces when they look at me, and they probably think, oh, she's exaggerating her symptoms. I've actually been told that. Okay. So that's why I say that. That's actually happened to me. And they were like, well, you're just exaggerating your symptoms. You're looking for attention. And I'm like, no, that's not what it is. If I'm looking for attention, it's just to bring awareness to the fact that migraine exists, and that it's not
Right.
easy, and that it's not something that you can just take a Tylenol and it goes away,
Right.
you know? So yes, I mean, it's hard for me to say what can I tell you to tell someone. That's really a personal experience, and I think that it depends on how you're feeling inside. Don't hold it in, express it, and hopefully that will either educate that person that's putting you through that, or make you at least give you some comfort that you are standing up for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a great answer. And I was just thinking about, when my children were young, and it did cost me my marriage, to be honest. I'm sure migraine wasn't the only factor, but it was a huge factor because I was so sick, that the strain it puts on a marriage. But, when you're in and out of emergency rooms and you're in and out of doctors and you're not able to be there for your spouse or for your children, there's no way that it cannot put a strain on your marriage. And so, I'm sure, all of us have been through that to some extent or another. But, when I was going through it with my children were young, there was no advocacy that I was aware of. Now, you can send your spouse or your family to videos. You can send them to my website. You can send them to Marina's website, to Erica's website. There are so many things that we can send people to help educate them so they can see, oh, it's not just my husband or my wife, it's not just my mom or my dad. This is a huge problem, and this is a serious disease. And I think that that's really great that we have those advocacy things. And, one of my things that my kid texted me today, and I'm just going to read it, was that, maybe because you kept me in the loop so much and communicated about it, I knew how serious it was, and not to hold it against you if it caused any hiccups. Hiccups is kind of a funny word because that is like so de minimis to what migraine does. I mean, it's devastating, right? But it's so cute that my son wrote that. And then he said, maybe that's a good practice for parenting as someone with migraine, just to make sure that you communicate with your children, with your spouse, with your family members about how serious this disease is, that it's not just a headache, and that's all about raising awareness. So we kind of come to the end. I feel like we could talk about this for hours because it's such a hot topic, but we're going to close with, just a few seconds each, maybe a few sentences each. Is what is one thing that you've learned about parenting with migraine that you would like to share? And we're going to start with you, Marina.
It's more like a message, that migraine is not your fault. You're doing your best. Your best is enough, and let go of the guilt.
I love that. That's wonderful. What about you, Aaron?
I'd have to agree with Marina on that. Learning to listen to your body so that you're not pushing yourself beyond your limits, so that you're not, so you don't force yourself to be less present than you could be. I'd rather be present at a 50% rate for a longer amount of time with my children than to push it to the limit and I'm laid out for days and then they miss more time with me. So know your limits and do what you can do to the best of your capacity.
Love that. Great advice. What about you, Erica?
Those who follow me know I'm a big proponent of mental health and talk therapy. I would say if you're struggling with guilt, it is misplaced, just like Marina explained and Aaron, and some of us are just more prone to feeling guilty and drowning in it. And so seek out a therapist to work through those emotions. I'm going to call Marina and ask her if there's a time I can set up an appointment with her because she seems like a great therapist.
Anytime, Erica.
Yeah, put me on your book.
It's not
I love that.
Disclaimer, this was not medical advice.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
great. I love that. And what I would say, just to add to what the other three have said, is build memories. Focus on the things that you can do. Take your eyes off what other families are doing and the things that, like Aaron says, will make you really sick so that you're completely out of it. And focus on the things that you can do. Tell your kids that you love them, and remind yourself that you may have migraine, but that does not stop you being a fabulous parent, and it is not your fault. So if you or a loved one are a parent and you live with migraine, we know that it can be really challenging, and that is putting it mildly. So we encourage you to focus on the things you can do with your children rather than those you cannot. Connect with others who understand so you can find the support that you need. Explore our website for for current evidence-based information to help you with migraine management. And of course, please talk to your headache specialist about how migraine is impacting your quality of life and your ability to parent. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you again to each of our parents. Again, a huge thank you to our sponsors for help making this event possible. Have a great day, everybody, and goodbye.